I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done. Mr. Speaker, and I rise today, Mr. Speaker, with a to whom it may concern message. To whom it may concern, ethnic cleansing in Gaza is not a joke, especially when it emanates from the President of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, when he has the ability to perfect what he says. Ethnic cleansing in Gaza is no joke, and the Prime Minister of Israel should be ashamed, knowing the history of his people, to stand there and allow such things to be said. Ethnic cleansing has been a crime against humanity. And I stand here today in the well to denounce what was said, to denounce what the president said, to denounce the complicity of the Prime Minister of Israel, and to remind people that Dr. King was right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And injustice in Gaza is a threat to justice in the United States of America. I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done. I also rise to say that the impeachment movement is going to be a grass-up movement, not a top-down. The people have got to move forward. The people have to demand it. And when the people demand it, it will be done. I did it before. I laid the foundation for impeachment, and it was done. Nobody knows more about it than I. And I know that it's time for us to lay the foundation again. On some issues, it is better to stand alone than not stand at all. On this issue, I stand alone, but I stand for justice. Mr. Speaker, and still I rise, a proud, liberated Democrat, unbossed, unbought, and unafraid. I rise as one who is not a sunshine freedom fighter, one who can stand before the crowds. This is what a sunshine freedom fighter does. Stand before the crowd, plenty of people to surround you, and receive the cheers. I believe that there are times when one has to stand alone. And on some issues, it is better to stand alone, Mr. Speaker, than not stand at all. So today, Mr. Speaker, I rise to proclaim February 4th, 2025, as a day that will live in infamy. It was a day when the leaders of two nuclear powers stood next to each other. And these nuclear power representatives, these persons who had the ability to create a nuclear holocaust, something that not even the mind of Dante can imagine. These two persons made comments about Gaza. One person said it would be nice, not in these exact words, to make Gaza a better place for people to live. I'm paraphrasing. But this person went on to talk about how this superpower would take over Gaza, and how this superpower might at some point have the American military to have boots on the ground in Gaza. Not in those exact words. These two superpowers there to work together, and the other said, well, I think this is an idea worth considering, to have the Palestinians move to another location. These two superpowers, the United States of America and Israel, were represented by the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel, two superpowers that are not in the business of saying things without thought, or they shouldn't be if they do. These two superpowers who could operationalize what they say. The United States of America can go into Gaza by and through its military. It can take over Gaza. It can remove the Palestinians from Gaza. The United States of America has already, with our tax dollars, sent money into Israel, munitions to Israel, and Israel has gone into Gaza. Yes, I know why. And yes, I believe that what Hamas did was a dastardly deed. And yes, that should have been redressed. But there is a point in time when your redress becomes an offense as opposed to a defense. And Israel went into Gaza and killed thousands of babies, obliterated schools, destroyed hospitals, infrastructure. Israel, with our tax dollars, and some of their own, and others perhaps, but our tax dollars, Israel destroyed Gaza. President himself has said that Gaza is no longer habitable. Not in those exact words. Israel, the United States of America, represented by their various agents, now indicating that Gaza can be taken over. But I marveled, quite frankly, at something that happened. The President of the United States of America said, I've talked to everybody, and everybody that I've talked to, they agree. Well, apparently the Saudis didn't agree. Apparently the Jordanians didn't agree. The Egyptians didn't agree. The Europeans didn't agree. There seems to be great disagreement, Mr. President, with what you said you would do in Gaza. And Mr. President, for your edification, and Mr. Prime Minister, for your education and edification, you should have talked to the Palestinians. You talk to people other than the Palestinians about what would happen to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not cattle. They're not animals that you can herd and push in one corner or decide you can go here and be happy. The Palestinians have the right to self-determination in their land. Gaza belongs to Palestinians. At one time, that whole area was called Palestine. Now you can't find Palestine on a map. I want you to know, Mr. Netanyahu, that what you said when you said this was worthy of consideration, you were agreeing with what the President of the United States said, and I want both of you to know that this act, what you were proposing, was ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing, Mr. President. Ethnic cleansing, Mr. Prime Minister. The two of you, superpowers. We are a global superpower, the United States of America. Israel is a regional superpower. You can operationalize what you say. You ought to be careful about the things that you say when you are speaking about the lives of other people. And I want you to know, the two of you, that what you have done cannot be erased. It is indelible. It is indelible. It is a stain on Israel, and it will be a stain on Israel from now until the end of times. People will remember that the Prime Minister of Israel, the Prime Minister of the state that passed a law that said that from the river to the sea, there will be no Palestinian state. That's what the Israel Knesset did. The Prime Minister of Israel has agreed that the Palestinians could be taken away or moved, and that the United States could take over Gaza. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. President, what you have done brings shame onto both countries, and I love my country, but you have brought shame on it. That doesn't mean that I don't still love it, because I love what it stands for. I salute the flag, say the Pledge of Allegiance, sing the national anthem. But the greatness of America is not in whether I will do these things. The greatness of America is in whether we will appreciate and allow people who do not do these things to have the freedom to do them. But what I'm saying to both of you is this. You brought shame on your respective countries, the United States of America and Israel. And that shame is something that you cannot walk back. You can't crawl it back. You can't slither it back. You brought shame on two great countries. And I assure you that it will live on your records and live in the annals of time forever. A day that will live in infamy, February the 4th. But it also calls to mind something else. It calls to mind now how this didn't just start on February 4th, 2025. It started in 1948 when the United States of America was the first country to recognize Israel as a country. And when we did it, we did not recognize a state for the Palestinians. That was the genesis of it. And it has now come to fruition that the Israelis, by and through their prime minister, desire to have us take over Gaza. This is shameful. So here's what I think has to happen. And I speak for myself and everybody who agrees with me. I will boycott. I will boycott. I want my colleagues to hear that. You have put us in a position such that if we disapprove of this kind of invidious discrimination and harm that's being perpetrated, that we can't say anything about it. I'm saying I will boycott. My first boycott will take place when there's a vote on sending more money, more tax dollars to Israel. If you bring a standalone bill to the floor, I'm going to boycott with my vote. I will not vote to send another dime to Israel. Israel has to do more than simply say, well, what we said the other day was not a big deal. We were just talking about a temporary relocation. That's not what you said. And we're not going to let you crawl that back. So I'm going to boycott. I know that there are persons who believe that to say that is somehow inappropriate. Well, I'm saying it live here and now. I will boycott. And I also understand that if I or you or you or you and someone else, any two of my colleagues, took to a podium and have it televised, and if you would say, I believe we ought to buy Israel and we ought to relocate the Israelis, I believe that if you said that, you'd never live it down. You'd be called anti-Semitic if you talked about relocating Israel the same way people are talking about relocating the people of Gaza, the Palestinians. You'd be anti-Semitic. So what does that make the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel? You have to be anti-Palestinian. You cannot say what you said and not be anti-Palestinian. This day is going to live in infamy. This will be forever a part of your history. Anti-Palestinian. But it didn't just start on that moment in time. It had to be a part of the Knesset of Israel. When they voted to not have a Palestinian state west of the Jordan. That's another way of saying from the river to the sea, there will be no Palestinian state. You can't say that in this country. If you say that, you will be labeled an anti-Semite. If you say that and you're a member of Congress, you'll be brought into the House and you'll be sanctioned for it. It happened to one of my colleagues, someone that I have respect for. May I change that? I have great respect for. It happened to her. Rashida Tlaib, from the river to the sea, and you're sanctioned, but you can pass a law in the Knesset saying from the river to the sea there will be no Palestinian state, yet a slogan that she could not operationalize, by the way. You can operationalize what you say, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, yet you don't want others to say what you are doing. You talk about how the Palestinians, more specifically Hamas, is an existential threat to Israel. You, Mr. President, and you, Mr. Prime Minister, are not just an existential threat. You are operationalizing that threat. You are, as I speak and as you spoke, making your plans to take over Gaza. You ought to have some sense of justice and righteousness and fair play, which seems to be absent from your very souls, for you to say these things and then deny others to say them. To have already done this, denied others from saying what you are doing. There is no amount of shame that you can show now. I assure you, this will be a stain on your records forever, and a stain on the state of Israel and on the United States of America, that you would go to the podium and do this. And you've done other things, Mr. President. I'm not going to go through an entire laundry list. I will talk about many of these things from time to time. But I want you to know, Mr. President, that I, personal pronoun, standing alone here in the House of Representatives, not looking for a cheering crowd, not looking for people to pat me on the back. Most of the people don't bother to care, it seems. But I will bring what you fear the most, because you've talked about how you think that we shouldn't have done what we did, and I, who laid the foundation for impeachment in the House of Representatives, along with the Honorable Maxine Waters. I don't want to ever take away the role that she played because she was there. But I will bring articles of impeachment to this floor. I will bring articles of impeachment to the floor of the House of Representatives. And I'm not saying that the articles will be about this, and I'm not saying what I'm talking about today, February 4th, 2025, being a day to live in infamy. And I'm not saying that they won't. I'm not going to say what will be in those articles now, because those articles will become a reality on the floor after a passage of time. We need to make sure that time has given other people an understanding. I think, and you know that I support peaceful protest. At some point, there will be people in the streets peacefully protesting with signs with impeachment on them. It's going to happen. And when it happens, I will come back to this floor at some point. May come back before. I will come back before, in fact, because what I will do will help to lay the foundation for the impeachment that is to come. And by the way, I've got 4 years to do it. 4 years. There's no rush, but I want you to know, and I want this to help galvanize the public, because marching is a great thing, but you have to have a goal. What is the end game? For me, the end game is to remove a president from office who would engage in ethnic cleansing. And there are other things that I shall not mention now that I would have him removed from office for. But you got to have the end game, for that's the end game for me. So when I march, and I shall be marching soon, if I march alone, it will be to remove this president from office. And I've got 4 years to do it. I've got this Congress, and there's another Congress. Now, there are some people who will agree with me if we take back the House. Friends, if we never take back the House, I'm going to do it. Because people need to know that there's a certain amount of courage within these chambers, and there are people who will not stand for what we're seeing, who won't stand for taking over the Department of Education, who won't stand for attempting to vitalize the nation, who won't stand for attempting to roll back the clock to segregation. There are some of us who won't stand for that. There are some people who will not stand by and watch you eviscerate the FBI and install people who are going to be loyal to you and not the Constitution. There are some people who won't stand for it. Others will do things to indicate their positions. I'm doing things to indicate my position. And I remember when I filed impeachment articles before, it was after the president fired Mr. Comey, Mr. James Comey, the director of the FBI. He fired Mr. Comey because Mr. Comey was investigating him. Mr. Comey would not tell the president, I'm not investigating you. The president wanted Mr. Comey out of loyalty, out of the president allowing him to be the director. He expected Mr. Comey to say, well, Mr. President, you're all clear. We're not investigating you. Well, he fired Mr. Comey, and we did not impeach him for that. If we had impeached him for that, we might not be here today, because we have given him reason to believe that if he could fire the director for investigating him, why not fire everybody that was a part of an investigation, a lawful investigation based on things that he did, a lawful investigation. He believes he can do it. We cannot allow this kind of injustice to go unnoticed. We cannot take this notion of we'll get to that when appropriate at a later time. Now is the time to stand up to injustice. Now is the time to let people know that you got the guts, the courage, the moral turpitude, the strength of your convictions. Stand up for your country. Stand against what you see happening. How can you see the takeover of the constabulary, the FBI, the CIA? What federal FBI agent will see the president commit a crime and call it to anybody's attention, knowing that the president can fire him, knowing that the Supreme Court has already given him immunity, knowing that the president can take his livelihood? We are putting the president not above the law, but beyond the law, beyond any means of redress for the injustices he perpetrates. That's not the country I want, and that's not the country my Republican friends across the aisle want. They're just too timid to say it. I'm not. And I want you to know also, Mr. President, that you're doing them a disservice. Here's why you're doing them a disservice. Because you can do these dastardly things and bring them along, drag them along, put anybody you want in charge of the Department of Defense. Put anybody you want. Just anybody. Doesn't matter. That's your choice. You can do these things and they can support you, but here's where you harm them. America's going to wake up. Some of them won't be coming back to Congress. You don't worry about getting reelected. Some of them do. You're putting them in a bad position. Someone will say, well, Al Green, you may not come back to Congress. If I don't come back, I will know that before I left, I spoke truth not only to power, but about power. Many of them will just leave in shame, afraid, fear of the president, afraid that he'll try to get Elon to spend $25 million against them, just as they did Jamal, just as they did Corey. And we never said a word about those, and that's another speech. But my point to you is, we cannot allow this kind of injustice to go unnoticed. And I assure you that what you have done to bring shame on yourselves, what you have done, Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister, to disgrace the countries that you represent, will live in infamy, and it will live in the records of the Congress of the United States of America. Not only by virtue of this speech, but also by written words that will be placed in the record, so that those who look through the vista of time, when they look upon this time, they will know who had the guts to stand here in the House of Representatives and call out your injustices.
That's all for today. Thank you. If you want global news to keep you up to date on any new developments, please subscribe our channel and forward our content with your friends on social media and email. Thank you very much for keep supporting me. Stay safe, be blessed. Namaste.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.